In this video, we're going to show you how to access the controller and the battery of the EVOLV Tour 2.0 and EVOLV Tour XL.
Okay, so for access to the controller, we just remove this front panel with a 4mm hex key or Allen wrench. Something thin, this razor blade, to get in here, because there has been some silicone. This one's come apart recently, so it's much easier. But if you can get in behind, just feed the blade in, wiggle it, and then we can free up the cover. And then we're going to undo this so we can get some cable slack. So now we just slide the cover up on the cable, and here you can see the controller and behind this piece of foam, and then we just kind of gently tease these wires out. There's another piece of foam up here. This just stops things from rattling around. Now we can pull out the controller. And now we can start undoing the wires. So we'll just go through some of the wires for the controller, what each one is. Starting here, this small XT30 connector is for the charge port. This large XT60 connector connects the controller to the battery. This bundle connects the throttle to the controller. This group here of two connects the e-brake sensor to the controller. And it doesn't matter how you connect them, you can swap them side to side, just as long as they're both connected. These three here are the phase wires to the motor. So for replacing the for replacing the motor or the controller, you'll have to cut this shrink wrap and then pull apart these bullet connectors here, which have this white shrink wrap. These two here are for left and right front lights, and again, doesn't matter which goes where. These two are for the rear lights, left and right, doesn't matter which one is connected. And this is just a main connector for the lights. If you connect these two gray wires, you will limit the speed of the scooter to about 13 kilometers per hour. So disconnect that if you want unlimited speed. And there you have various connectors for this controller. Okay, if you want to replace the battery, access is from the back, and that's going to remove the entire rear end here. So first thing is I'm going to undo the two connectors at the front. These two XT connectors, the small XT30 for the charge port, the large XT60 for the battery. So there's nothing holding the battery in from the front. You can push it from the back, out the back. So first thing, I'm going to remove the rear mudguard. And that's just so we don't damage it and we have the wheel off. you'll notice that we have the scooter in the air and we have it bungee corded. Bungee so it won't fall over. Now, there's a wire tie, zip tie here. I'm going to snip. So to remove this rear assembly, there are 2 screws in the top on the deck. These 2. 2 screws that hold the kickstand in place. 2 more on the right side. And we have 2 screws on the bottom. I'm just gonna and then the last 2 underneath. And we're ready to remove this whole rear assembly. Suspension, shocks, dampers, rear wheel. It's just going to slide out. And it's right now what's holding it is silicone that's been used to seal around this black block, pardon me. So first time we remove it, it's going to require 2 people. This has just come out. So you're going to probably require a mallet or a soft-faced hammer and some persuasion. And here we are. Here you can see the black silicone. And on the other side. And now you're going to need a stand to set this assembly on. We can pull these cables a bit. And we now have access to the battery. So just undo these cable holders here. It'll give you some more slack. So now that we have the motor and rear wheel assembly disconnected, I want to take care that we're not putting any strain on the brake cable here. We're not putting any strain on the motor cable. And we have the benefit of 2 stands here, but if you're doing this at home, you're going to need on the ground, maybe some various blocks to support things. And now we can pull the battery out. So I'm going to use the handle here of this mallet and push it from the front. We're just going to slide this out. If you didn't disconnect earlier, at this point they'll have been disconnected on their own. And here we have a 48 volt, 13 amp hour battery. And we have the charge port and the fuse that I mentioned earlier. So with the battery back in, we can reinstall the rear end. So I'm just going to put a little bit of silicone, seal up the battery compartment. And then There are two channels here on the bottom. Here for the brake cable and here for the motor cable. So they provide clearance for the cables. And I'm just going to fit into those slots. So get the cables over these cable guides and we'll slide this into place. And you'll be able to check when all 6 holes are visible. Another place to silicone is the exit points of the brake cable and the motor cable on the other side. And all that's left to do for the rear end is put the fasteners back on, use some blue Loctite if it's been worn away, if the factory thread locker is worn away, and just snug up all the fasteners good and tight and you'll be done. So now that you've reconnected your new controller, if that's what the problem was, or you've done some work with the battery and you're ready to button this back together. So we have all our connectors together. It's a good idea to, at this point, maybe power up the scooter and ensure everything works correctly. And by all means, use any photos you took previously to help remind you which connectors go where. So we're going to put the foam back in between the battery and the controller. And now we're going to persuade these wires back into the battery compartment. Any photos you took earlier may be helpful. It helps if you get the stiffer wires in first. When you have your controller back in and all the wires neatly in place, make sure all your foam goes in. This prevents things from rattling. It may take you a few attempts. The wires do tend to remember how they folded and where they went before, so use that. Before we close up the cover, we can see where the factory had put the black silicone in. So we're just going to put thin film of silicone in those areas. This is just your regular RTV silicone. And we'll try not to get it all over our hands as we slide this cover back down the wires. Tuck things back in. screwdriver's in almost in place. These things white, and your screws back together.